streets any way they can find a place. And this means cooking on the streets, everything, because there's just nowhere else to go. And I talked to some people about this, and they said in the old days it was a lot better. There were a lot more people living out in the countryside, taking care of growing the crops. And this was where they would have been much better off. But you know how people are all over the world. The same thing happens in the United States. People always think if they can go to the city, there'll be jobs, they'll be able to get more money, they'll be able to support their family better. So that's what began to happen in India. The people began to go into the cities and to try to get jobs. Well, like anywhere, you get too many people, and their population is very large over there. You get too many people going into a city trying to find jobs, there isn't enough to go around. And I guess they stayed because they thought they could make some money anyway. Well, I've talked to some other people since then, and they said used to be that the people could make money farming, but that now the government is not subsidizing them like they should be to give them the money that they can live on the farms. So they're starving to death out there. So what are they going to do? They are going to head for the cities where they think they can find something anyway. Even if it's just begging, they figure at least they'll have some money. And that's what's happening. But it was discouraging to see all of this. As long as we were in the hotel, in the compound, the grounds surrounding the hotel, it was like being in two separate worlds, as though the caste system is really very much still alive over there. Now, probably I'm going to get some emails from some of you saying I don't understand what's going on, and maybe I'm judging. I'm not judging. I'm just reporting what I saw. And maybe I do have it wrong, because some people have corrected me since I got back that it's just too big of a problem for the government over there to try to work this out. But anyway, it is a big extreme from the very poor to the others that have jobs and have money and have houses. So on the one day then, we went to Agra to see the Taj Mahal. That was a long trip, all day. We started out early in the morning. We didn't get back till 11 o'clock that night because it's a lot further than we thought it was going to be. But the minute we left the compound of the hotel, we went for hours where it was just part of the city. I kept saying, well, when are we going to get out of New Delhi? Because it was just crowds of people and poverty all along the sides of the roads. And I said, when are we going to get out of the city? And we just kept going and driving for hours. There'd be a couple of times you would see a few fields here and there, but not enough like we would have here, like in Arkansas. It's mostly rural, which is a total 180-degree opposite from the way it was over there. And we stopped for lunch, and it would always be at a very nice place. They took very good care of us. But I guess all of this kind of spoiled what I was expecting from the Taj Mahal, because of all we had to go through to get there. Now, the Taj Mahal is said to be the most beautiful building in the world, and I've seen pictures of it where it is. It's very beautiful. Well, the time we arrived there was, beggars and everything all around the gates right before we're going to go in. And I guess it kind of took away from it. But when we went in, walked onto the grounds, it is very awe-inspiring to see the Taj Mahal and the reflecting pool. That is awe-inspiring. But all the pictures I've ever seen of it have always been just that, the Taj Mahal and the reflecting pool. But when we actually got inside, there were mobs of people, all these tourists that come from everywhere to see this. So it wasn't isolated the way you would think it was going to be from the pictures. There were just mobs of people all over the place. But it was very beautiful, and we spent several hours there. But it is a tomb. That's the only thing that was inside of that building, was the tomb of the wife, because it was built for her. And I think his is in there also, I believe. But we couldn't get into that one part because they said parts of it have been closed off because people were doing graffiti, which is very disrespectful because this is a very beautiful place. But we got to see it, and it was something that I will never forget. But it may have been better if we hadn't have had to go through all of the poverty before getting there to see this wonderful place in the middle of Agra. And we walked around to the back of the Taj Mahal. There's a river. And it used to be a huge, beautiful river. But now it is reduced to just a small stream. And the people were saying the river is dying. And there was one woman in our group who says she goes all over the world and she's checking all this out. But she says it's happening everywhere, all over the world, that the rivers, the water is changing. There is lakes. I know there's supposed to be one in Russia that is shrinking. There's many other places where the rivers and the lakes are drying up. But then now we hear about the ice caps melting, and which are raising the water in some parts of the world. So it seems almost like a contradiction with all of these. Why is the water disappearing in some areas where people need it, and you have too much in other areas? But a man that I know who is very familiar with India said it was a big, beautiful river until they began damming it up. And they dammed it up to use the water for irrigation for the crops. And this is what's reduced the river to this small stream now in the back of the Taj Mahal. So I suppose there are reasons for all of these things. And my friend kept saying they need to bring industry in here. They need to bring in something to give people jobs. Well, I've heard they are, because in Bangalore, they are bringing in all of the computers into that area. But that's it. It's mostly technology. People can't get jobs unless they have training in this technology. So, anyway, these were some of my impressions of India. And we went there. We was there for a week, and I did my talks. I stayed after the conference because they wanted me to do another talk for the general public, the ones who were not the professional hypnotists, the ones who just wanted to come and hear the talk. So we were there for a week, and then we were supposed to leave this next morning to go on to Moscow. And what was supposed to have been a 6-hour flight from New Delhi to Moscow turned into 10 hours. We sat on the runway for over 3.5 hours waiting for the plane to take off. This was a Russian airline. And we were saying, what's holding it up? Well, we got on the plane. It was still dark. And they said there was fog. And I thought, well, the fog will burn off as soon as the sun comes out. But we kept sitting there, and we kept asking the stewardess, and they said, well, there's fog everywhere. We can't take off until the fog lifts. And I'm sitting there with all these people around us in their saris and their turbans, and these men kept saying, but we don't have fog in New Delhi, especially in March. We don't. And we said, well, so they hadn't had any rain. They said, well, there was fog out there. And the Russian airliner didn't have any movies. It didn't have anything. So we just sat there waiting for it to decide to take off. I started using my visualization and talking to the fog, saying, you don't want to stay on the ground like this. You don't want to stay on the earth. It's too dense and heavy. Suppose we evolve. Let's reincarnate. Let's evolve, and you can lift off the earth and change into a nice, beautiful cloud. and drift up in the sky. Then you can just drift around and make rain somewhere. Isn't that a good idea? Let's just leave the earth and go on up and become a cloud. I thought if I could talk to it, maybe we could get it to dissipate and get off the ground. Those of you that know me know that this is what I do anyway. Anyway, after a little bit, it finally did begin to thin out to where we were able to take off. But it was a long, long flight to Moscow. No movies, and a very, very crowded plane. Then we get into Moscow. We were late getting there because of the long delay. And I thought I was going to have plenty of time. But when they met me at the Moscow airport, they said, you've got a book signing and a lecture tonight. And that left me about 3 hours at the most. And I said, well, I'd hoped to get, to go back and get something to eat and relax for a little bit. And they said, there's not going to be time. So they had to take us right to the hotel and then get ready for the lecture and the book signing that night. And here we are coming from the warm climate in India into 4 feet of snow in Moscow. And the people in Moscow know how to take care of their streets because they keep the streets cleared off and the sidewalks. But still, it was very cold. So I could just see my body saying, what are you doing to me now? You're switching around too much here. But my publisher there had planned a very extensive publicity campaign the whole time I was there because he has now translated more of my books into Russian and more people are learning about them. The first book he translated last year was the one Between Death and Life, and that's already now, I believe, in its 3rd printing. It is selling very well in Russia and the Ukraine. So this time, they translated my book, Jesus and the Essenes. And I was very excited about that because it just came off the press in time for the first book signing. And I got to see it for the first time. And those of you who are not writers, I don't think can understand the excitement and the sense of fulfillment to see your book traveling everywhere and transforming into all these different covers and different appearances. It's like my books had gained a life of their own, I guess you would say. I felt like, a writer feels that you create the book. It's like having a child. You have a baby. But then the baby grows up and it goes off into the world and it takes on a life of its own and becomes its own entity. And that's what my books have done. My 13 books have taken on a life of their own, an energy of their own, and they are all over the world now. And they handed me the new book, a copy of the Jesus and the Essenes. And I was so happy that they kept the cover because the picture that I put on the cover had a very special meaning. And it is described in the book.